Rocky 4 asks one of the most important questions ever asked in the history of cinema. Can a boxer from Philadelphia ease international tensions and bring an end to the Cold War? The answer is, of course not, that's ridiculous. But Rocky 4 still thinks that can happen and does it with gusto and enjoyable heart and spirit in Rocky 4. Released in 1985, Sylvester Stallone returns to the iconic role of Rocky Balboa, where he faces off against his most deadliest opponent yet, Drago, played by Dolph Lundgren. A champion Soviet boxer who kills Rocky's friend and mentor, Apollo Creed, played by Carl Weathers, in a boxing match. So Rocky decides that he must now face off this deadly opponent in the Soviet Union, in this bizarre but very enjoyable entry in the franchise. An entry that even features James Brown singing Living in America. And a robot. Yeah, can't forget that robot. Yeah, during this time, lots of movies and TV shows were exploring the Cold War. Heck, even Superman got in on the Cold War action in Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. So today we are going to go back and look into the Cold War themed Rocky movie by looking into 10 things that you didn't know about Rocky 4. Let's check it out. Number 10. The script led to a lawsuit. Rocky 3 came out in 1982 and was a huge success, making $270 million in the box office, making it the highest grossing Rocky movie of that time, even beating the original Rocky. So naturally, with great success comes great responsibility to make more sequels. So Sylvester Stallone and United Artists got to work on making a fourth Rocky movie. However, a writer called Timothy Anderson wrote a treatment for a potential Rocky 4 and submitted it to MGM United Artists. But his script was ultimately turned down. Instead, Stallone wrote his own script and, just like the previous two Rocky movies, also acted as the film's director. However, upon watching Rocky 4, Anderson felt the movie's story was very similar to his treatment, which led to a court case called Anderson vs. Stallone. However, the court deemed Anderson's script to be unauthorized, featuring pre-existing characters which Stallone had previously created for his previous Rocky movies, and thus Anderson couldn't claim copyright infringement on characters that he didn't legally own. The case was eventually settled out of court. So, just how similar was Anderson's script to the finished final film? Well, I don't know, I haven't seen his treatment. But yeah, it's always messy when court cases get in the way of creativity. Number 9. Carl Weathers nearly quit the movie. Rocky 4 sees the return and dramatic departure of the character Apollo Creed, played by legendary actor Carl Weathers. The character who started off as Rocky's adversary, but would become his friend and mentor. In Rocky 4, Creed dies at the hands of Drago during a boxing match, in a brave move to kill off one of the most celebrated and likeable characters in the series. However, according to Stallone, Weathers nearly walked out of the project due to a feud that he had with co-star Dolph Lundgren. It was while filming the boxing scene. Apparently Lundgren took a really aggressive approach, which angered Weathers, which caused him to storm off the set, claiming that he was going to call his agent and leave the production. This caused the production of Rocky 4 to stop for 4 days, and Stallone had to act as a mediator, to get Weathers and Lundgren to put aside their differences and to get back to filming, with Lundgren agreeing not to be so aggressive. So thankfully, Weathers returned to continue filming his scenes in the movie. Who knows, maybe emotions were high for Weathers, as this character that he had created and played in 3 movies was simply getting killed off. If it was me, I'll probably be ticked off too. Number 8. The story behind the robot. Ah yes, the robot. There was no getting away from that infamous robot. After all, when Rocky 4 isn't referred to as the Russian Rocky movie, it's also known as the Rocky movie with that weird robot, where we see the Paulie character interact with a robot that Rocky has bought on his birthday. Yep, actual artificial intelligence in a Rocky movie. Although having a robot in a Rocky movie may seem out of place, and well, let's be honest, it is, it wasn't just something thrown in there randomly. The robot was created by International Robotics Incorporated, and Stallone wanted to use the robot after the robot was used in real life to help with his son's autism. which I guess is kind of like what they do nowadays, where they give children with autism tablets with learning games on them to help with their development. Stallone was impressed with the robot and decided to incorporate it into Rocky 4. The robot itself became a celebrity after Rocky 4, with it being entered into the Actors Guild, and even went on tour with James Brown. Well, I guess the robot has to pay the bills and make a living somehow. Number 7. Filming location. Rocky 4 was something of a departure in the series, in that it sees the Rocky character leave the States and head to Russia in order to train himself up and take on Drago, where Rocky proves his determination by getting into shape and growing a beard, because nothing says tough more than a beard. Trust me, I know. However, in order to film the Russia scenes, the crew didn't actually travel to Mother Russia. Instead, the scenes where Rocky is training were filmed in a national park in Wyoming, so it was still filmed in the States. However, the final boxing match was filmed at the Argo Dome in Vancouver, British Columbia. And they went all out to make this place look as Russian as they possibly could by putting Russian signs all over the place, even the restrooms, which helped to give off the illusion that Rocky is now in unfamiliar territories.
We've spent all this time calling Rocky 4 the Russian Rocky movie, when in reality it's more like the Canadian Rocky movie?
Number 6. Stallone seriously injured. So as mentioned, there were issues filming the fight scenes between Weathers and Lundgren. However, Stallone also had his own issues filming his fight scenes with the tough Swedish martial artist turned actor. During their fight sequence, Stallone and Lundgren decided not to hold back and deliver fake punches, but to actually go at it and hit each other for real, as Stallone wanted the fight to seem realistic and authentic. However, this nearly led to disaster, in which Lundgren punched Stallone in the chest so hard it caused his heart to swell. Stallone was immediately flown from the set to a hospital in Santa Monica, where he would go on to be in intensive care for 8 days. Yikes! But thankfully he made a full recovery, and when filming recommenced, it was decided to not improvise the fighting, and to not take such a dangerously realistic approach.
Well, gee whiz, say what you want to say about Lundgren, the guy is a lethal weapon! I take back any mean thing that I may have said about the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe movie. Please, Lundgren, don't hurt me.
Number 5. Novelization. So to coincide with the movie's release, a novelization of Rocky 4 was published, which was written by Sylvester Stallone himself. Yep, Stallone wrote the book. From research I've done of this novelization, it's actually quite different to the movie, and explores the psychology more of the characters, particularly Drago. In the novel, he is seen as being more sympathetic and less like a straight-up villain. However, the biggest difference between movie and novel is a subplot in which Adrian is pregnant. I wonder if that was intended to be in the movie but vetoed out, but it drastically changes the dynamics of the story and raises the stakes. And of course there is even more of the robot in the novel, with it being hinted that Paulie is having a romantic relationship with said robot, which is both awesome and hilarious, with the robot getting Paulie drunk and even flirting taking place. In the novel, the character Rocky is actually really creeped out by this, and states that he just bought the robot as a joke, but now it's turning into something more than a machine. Yeah, it's turning into Paulie's love interest.
Brilliant! They should have had Paulie and the robot get married in Rocky 5. That would have made it a much better movie.
Number 4. Originally, the series was to stop at 3. Stallone stated in 1979 that there was to be no Rocky 4, claiming that you've got to call halt. His original vision for the series was to be a trilogy. However, after the release of Rocky 3, he started to change his mind and ease more and more into the idea of a 4th Rocky outing. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the $270 million that Rocky 3 made. To be fair though, in 1982, Stallone said that he would be up for making Rocky 4 if they did something different with the character, for Rocky to, quote, enter the international community. In other words, a Rocky movie that was more transatlantic. And given how the Cold War was a hot topic of the moment, that was the direction to take Rocky 4. In other words, having Rocky face an opponent of rival ideological values, of a real-life existing conflict of the time. Stallone said that he took inspiration from real-life boxing matches between American boxer Joe Louis and German heavyweight Max Schmeling, who at that time was considered as a, quote, Nazi puppet, which took place in 1936 and 1938, a claim which no doubt would have helped Stallone in the Anderson vs. Stallone court case.
So, yeah, there could have easily have been no more Rocky movies after Part 3. And the only thing that changed this was the opportunity to take Rocky into new territories.
Number 3, The Karate Kid caused a change in music. Rocky 4 is the only entry in the original Rocky film series not to use music by composer Bill Conti. At the time of Rocky 4's production, Conti was unavailable due to scoring The Karate Kid. So instead, musician Vince DiCola was brought on board to score the film. DiCola had previously worked on music for the Saturday Night Fever sequel, Staying Alive, which was also directed by Sylvester Stallone, and after Rocky 4 he would go on to score the Transformers movie. However, because of this, Rocky 4 doesn't feature the famous Gonna Fly Now song, which features in all the other Rocky movies and had become an iconic part of the franchise. Instead, DiCola composes new montage music, although some musical cues of Gonna Fly Now are incorporated into DiCola's score, but not in the famous montage scene, which is what the song was most well known for. There is a rumour that the montage training music was the Final Countdown by Europe, on the account that it sounds similar, but the Final Countdown wasn't released until a year after Rocky 4's release. Rocky 4 also features songs from pop artists who were big at the time, like Kenny Loggins, as well as a new song from Survivor, whom had great success in the previous Rocky movie with Eye of the Tiger. The song they provided for Rocky 4 was Burning Heat. It didn't have the impact or longevity that Eye of the Tiger has, but it's still a catchy song that makes you want to get fit in your own training montage. Musician Peter Cetera claims that he wrote the song Glory of Love for Rocky 4, but United Artists turned it down, so instead the song was used for The Karate Kid Part 2. Number 2, video game. A video game based on Rocky came out 2 years after the release of Rocky 4 on the Sega Master System in 1987. Okay, the game wasn't a direct link to the movie, but rather focusing on all the Rocky movies that had been made up until that point, where players get to play as Rocky and help him train and get stronger as he takes on opponents like Apollo Creed, Clubber Lang, and Ivan Drago. And the more you progress, the more your strength and durability increases. Kind of like the movies, I guess. And for a start, the graphics actually look pretty good for its time. I remember seeing this game being shown on display at an electronics goods store when I was a kid, and I was hooked. It made me want to play it. However, some of the other kids that I knew who had this game said that it wasn't very good and that they found it frustrating. So it didn't make me convert from Nintendo to Sega. And yeah, with the passing of time, this game hasn't gotten the best reputation. Although I am sure that there are some who played it and loved it. I like the idea of playing as Rocky and fighting opponents that he has fought throughout the film series, and this formula has been recycled in other more successful games in later years. Number 1, highest grossing sports movie for 24 years. Rocky 4 was released in November 1985, and it didn't live up to Rocky 3's records. It gloriously outdid them, making over $300 million in the box office, making this Rocky entry a knockout success, and the highest grossing movie in the franchise. Truly, the Rocky franchise had now reached its peak and was at the height of its success. Rocky 4 also held a record of being the highest grossing sports movie for 24 years, until the 2009 movie The Blind Side, which beat Rocky 4 by $9 million, so it definitely paid off to make a fourth entry. However, critical reception was average. Some critics felt that the Rocky series was long past its prime, and that it was on its last legs. The over-the-topness and cheesiness felt like a far cry from the humble rags-to-riches underdog tale of the first Rocky movie. Empire magazine flat out called it a laughable turd. Basically, it was felt that the series just wasn't realistic anymore, and going more and more into the absurd, and would also go on to win 5 Razzies, including Worst Actor for Sylvester Stallone. But despite this, it seems that audiences couldn't get enough of Rocky 4, and it's still a guilty pleasure to this day for fans of the Rocky series. Yes, it's not a masterpiece like the first movie, but it means well and it has a good heart, and behind its flaws, it's a very enjoyable movie.
I like Rocky 4. I find Rocky 3 and Rocky 4 to be very similar in that they are fun, enjoyable, guilty pleasures. They actually make a great double bill. Yes, they both have their wacky and over-the-top absurd moments, but that's just part of the charm. They represent a more innocent time, a time in the 80s when the over-the-top cheesiness was the way to go. So I will always have a special place in my heart for Rocky 4. Anywho, I'm Minty, and remember, everyone can change. See ya!